We now move on to another exciting portion of our morning, which is the open forum. So at this point, may I ask James to join us, and Dr. Lasco as well, and Felix to come back into the room. To our participants, I know we know you've listened very well to the presentations of our esteemed speakers. I mean, we're so privileged to have quite insightful lineup of presentations this morning. So now is really the time to share with us your questions or your thoughts. For the Zoom participants, you may use the chat box located on the menu panel. And for our viewers on Facebook, we have our staff on standby to relay your questions. So I think some people may still be thinking about their questions, but we've had already a few come through. I think I'll start us off for now. James, Felix, both of your organizations work with a variety of different scenarios, and as made evident by James's presentation, there are numerous scenarios available with their own set of assumptions and uncertainties. For smaller businesses who may not yet have the resources or to access the technologies and the services to synthesize all these different scenarios, how would you say they discern which ones to use or which ones are the most appropriate for their purposes?
Yes, it's a wonderful question. I think that using technology solutions like the one that I showed, like the one that Felix just walked us through, really exciting work there, is probably going to be a lot more accessible than let's say hiring a consultant. No, I used to run a small business. I was not going to hire a consultant. We didn't, as a climate risk company, I didn't have a climate risk plan. I didn't have a business continuity plan. So I understand that that it's just not top of mind for anyone. The only other thing that I would recommend at the moment is the report that I referenced. I really think is a quite wonderful starting point. That's the country report from the World Bank. That might have some great suggestions to get started. And as we said, getting started is a lot better than not getting started.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, so you know, since we've talked to a lot of small business, we talked to businesses with budget, without budget, you know, all these things, right? So we always advise that, you know, for businesses with you know, without that much budget. So there's a lot of programs out there. Like for example, you know, Arise Philippines is doing their PDRF, you know, all these things. So there's a lot of programs that you could also you know, enroll so that you get these you know, information. This some information are almost like the same, right? But if you're, let's say, in an energy company who does like more requirements needed, so you know, that's the time, you know, you evaluate these commercial solutions. But however, we notice in Asia and in this part of the world, most Asians like it the way they want to, right? Like, so they want it like more custom tailored to them. So I think it's more just customizing it based really on what they need, and only that part. So they, let's say if I just want flood susceptibility or something, just offer them flood. So I mean, it's very difficult to overwhelm sometimes you know, the clients with, you know, a lot of information. So it has to be more targeted. And as I mentioned, in the Philippines, since our like compared, let's say for example, in US, in Europe, let's say for example with S&P and Global, so these markets are already matured, right? But in the Philippines, when you, let's say, when you talk about this with, let's say for example with the clients, they don't even notice that they need it, right? Like, I mean, the risk communications and also the approach should be a more maybe light version, right? Like, hey, you know, these things. So there's an art to it. I think in the Philippines, you have to take it slow. You have to let the industries understand that these things are very helpful. And there are programs out there. If you don't want to, you know, spend anything, there are also programs out there that, you know, and if it's really mandated, so you really have to spend about it. So it's not about like who the best vendor is, but there are vendors with different specialties, right? So it depends on you know, on really the need of that industry.
Thank you so much, James and Felix. Yeah, I think, for this morning, we have a variety of different industries joining us. So I think moving forward, it's really them trying to figure out, okay, what is the next step and trying to find the most suitable information for them. I think Felix had mentioned in his presentation that, in the Philippines, I don't think specifically, I guess this is common, all over the world as well. Access to private, especially, and public sector data can be quite difficult. Would you have some tips for these small businesses on accessing publicly available data, or which publicly available data sets should they be referring to initially?
Yeah. So yeah, it's actually a real problem in the Philippines. So I attended a lot of conference. This data sharing problem is very in the because let's say example, there's a city who has like 200 sensors and has very good data, but they don't want to share it, right? So the national government also does not have some. I'm not saying I'm not criticizing it. What I'm saying is governments have good infrastructure, but they don't have even they don't allow public to access it. They don't have these APIs in place, all these things, right? So it's very hard to get the data. So you need to really like go through the needle for you to but the private organizations, what they're trying to do is to create these programs to get that data, right, in any way. So like Comunidad, what we're trying to do is to be partner with these organizations so that we could get the data and we could make it useful for many industries. So it's still a long way. Imagine but the truth is Philippines has a lot of good data, but just some data are just secret. Some data are, hey, I have this data. For example, if James wants to analyze like the city, the data is there, but it's very hard to get a hold of it. But last time I had these AI conferences that you could now, like, the AI could now read all these hard copy data that the government is providing. So these are risk analysis that they do. So it's still a long way, but because there's no digitized version. That's the problem. There's not much digitized version, and I think most of the science agencies in the Philippines, for the past years, haven't been investing in digitization. They just invest in the science, but making the data useful, they forgot about it. But I think now they're doing a lot of work in order for it to be exposed. And well, I hope in the next 5 years, all that data could be shared to the private. And by the way, the private sector too is doing a lot, like PDRF, Arise Philippines. Before it was like Weather Philippines Foundation. There's a lot more. So the private sector is also helping in in building these things. And I think for the private sector, it's very easy to access it rather than the public sector in the Philippines. So it's the truth, but along the way, it's improving now.
Yeah. Manna, can I chime in here?
Of course.
Just to share, just to add on to what Felix said, and that is, of course, the center, our own center. One strategy we're doing is to partner with agencies of DOST, for example, Department of Science and Technology. We partner with our PAGASA or the Met office here in the Philippines. And in that way, we're able to tap into their data and sort of co-publish this information. We do that as well with the Climate Change Commission. Of course, there are challenges, Felix. We definitely agree with you. And we're also trying to overcome this hurdle. But I think this is the way forward. We really need more access to those data, bearing in mind, of course, some kind of data privacy and data ownership. But I think there's a way ahead as we continue to explore, accessing and sharing those data to a wider public. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Sir Adel. I think, James, you were one of sort of the early actors in this space. So maybe you could also share with us your own experiences in the US or elsewhere. How did you deal with the accessibility to public data if you had that challenge as well?
Yeah, we actually did start with publicly available data, and my co-founder and I thought of the idea when we were both working at NOAA has a National Climatic Data Center. The US puts all its weather and climate data in one place. And we saw all this data, and it's free for the American public. Well, actually, it's free for anybody. And we saw this data and just thought this isn't usable by business. If you can figure out even how to download it and what it's saying, you kind of need a PhD in climatology to even understand it. And then on top of that, it just tells you hotter, drier, wetter, colder. It doesn't tell you, so what are the financial implications? So that's why we really wanted to do what we did. I will point out that there are NGOs and nonprofits scattered around the world who do wonderful types of risk modeling and make that available. There's an open source project called OS Climate that is trying to create an open source climate risk engine for the whole world to have access to. So stay tuned there.
Thanks so much for that, James. Yeah, I wish we had more time for this open forum, but I am going to just end with one last, actually it's two questions that I'm going to force into one question. And I hope, each of you could respond for the group. In your experiences, are there standard mitigative or adaptive actions that companies should be doing regardless of size? Basically, fundamentally, what should they be doing? And for the science can be extremely complex. So what information would you like to highlight, or what data or information specifically would you like to highlight for small businesses such as those joining us this morning? And that's it for my questions. And yeah, I hope we could go through all three of you with that.
Yeah, I think for so yesterday I was with a sustainability event with SEC. Then they were saying that small businesses in the future will also do their sustainability reporting, right? So, but of course, small business even does not have even like accounting software, all these things, right? So and also I think in terms of climate adaptation in the Philippines, for example, it should be more on a localized approach, and I think they have to coordinate with the local government unit, the private sector, public sector, SMEs. And the local government units now are starting to invest. Like example, Quezon City, Makati City, they have their own meteorologists now. They hired meteorologists. They have their own climate team. They're now doing all the modelings, and they're now trying to digitize all the data. Eventually, in the next 2 to 3 years, it will be a new culture within the local government, and this data will be accessible because they are now starting to invest in digitizing these tools. And those data could be used by, let's say, S&P Global. This could be used by Comunidad, by a lot of things. So it's we're starting there, as mentioned by Dr. Lasco. So we're starting there already. But in terms of mitigation, sustainability reporting, it's a different. There's a lot of frameworks, and Philippines still couldn't find what to follow. So I think in terms of that, mostly small businesses could not really afford what the other countries are doing in terms of sustainability reporting. You cannot charge this amount to small businesses when you do sustainability reporting. So I think we still have a long way there, but it's good that the sustainability community in the Philippines are starting and to find a better solution for for SMEs.
Thanks, Felix. James, could we go to you?
Sure. I think I want to mention financial preparations and then physical preparations. Financially, the field of insurance is also sometimes called risk transfer. And if insurance is available to a small or medium-sized business for physical risks and physical disasters, that is something worth looking at the cost benefit for. And in general, if a disaster would sort of wipe you out, then it's often a good idea to get an insurance. If you have the balance sheet to be able to handle a disaster, maybe the insurance is not so necessary. So that's on the financial side. On the physical side, while I'm not an expert on the climate of the Philippines, I believe that the top 3 perils would be typhoons, flooding, and heat. I think for typhoons, as Felix pointed out, the number one thing with typhoons is preparedness. If it's coming, get out of the way. I mean, it's just, like that's easier said than done, but that's about all you can do. With flooding, unfortunately, it kind of boils down to either you move, if you can, move your facility, or move your assets that are in harm's way, or if you can't move, drainage. And if you can't do those two, maybe a seawall or something, if you can deal with that. And then with heat, I think the number one thing to be aware of is to be aware. Make sure that your workers who are outside are aware, and then know what steps to take to avoid being in life-threatening or health-threatening heat. So awareness and avoidance. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you so much, James. Sir, you can close us off for the open forum.
Yeah, well, just highlighting that for small businesses in the Philippines, it's really more of adaptation and resilience, more than mitigation, as alluded to earlier by Felix. Maybe they're not too aware of greenhouse gases and emissions and targets, but for sure, they need to go into resilience, and then just echo as well and support what my other panelists said. And with that, Manna, back to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think I speak for everyone when we say we wish we had more time for this discussion, but I know, James, it's very late over there, so I'd like to thank you for joining us, and to the rest of our speakers for this wonderful exchange. We're taking note of additional questions that you have sent to us via direct message in the chat, but we unfortunately do have to proceed to the next part of our program.